Thank you.
Roll call.
Hebner.
Here.
Here. Kepler.
Here.
Dodsworth.
Here.
Porter. Here. Moyer is not. Ryman.
Here.
All right, group posting, this is posted on the 9th of August. Home News, Star News, Times Tribune, Village of Reno, Village of Black Earth, Village of Mazamini, and the Village of Cross Plains. Approval of agenda?
So move.
Second.
All right. Bob and Kyle, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we have an agenda. Public comment. Anyone from the public wishes to speak? Now would be the time to speak, because otherwise it's just going to be staff and commission members.
Item 10, Paul Pastine, I would like to speak. Thank you. Discussion possible action of project scope and structure. Not sure if that means that you might vote to approve the whole project tonight, but
We might,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's possible, so yeah.
I saw that. I just hope you don't approve it tonight. Wait until, I know you want to get going on and everything. Ben's done a lot of work and everything, but maybe wait until public meetings so the public can have more of a chance to absorb what really might or what's going to happen, instead of come to the meeting and say this is what's going to happen, like as far as perception in people's minds. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Anything else? And we will move on to number 6, approval of the minutes from the July 18th, 2024 meeting.
So move.
I'll give it to Kate. And Ray second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. President's report. This was added, it's just, we have a lot of new members and we're getting into some really big discussions. And I just wanted to kind of, a reminder for some and news for the newer members. Terry, being the newest, isn't here for it, but the commission's job, our commission's job is to make decisions on the activities and what's needed to effectively run the sewer plant. So we will set rates according to what our bills are, what we need, what our budgets are, what our plans are for projects, and those rates get passed on to the municipalities. So that's what we bill the municipalities. We do not decide what the customers on their end pay. That's for the municipalities to decide. They're given what they're going to be paying, and they can adjust their rates whichever way, or however big or little or whatever they want to do, but we don't make any decisions towards that. So our decisions are basically what we need to run the plant effectively. And then the communities, each one will decide what they need to run their utility effectively by their rates. So I just kind of want to remind everyone so we don't get lost in the weeds about discussing things that we don't control. So, all right, we will move on to the next thing. Discussion of Dane intermunicipal agreement. Ben is going to take this. Ben Heidemann from Sun Country, in case everybody doesn't know him. It's going to take this discussion.
And this is just a little bit of a segue off of what Peter just said, but after chatting with Jeff and Peter, thought it would be a good opportunity to just kind of re-highlight some of the things that are in your intermunicipal agreement as it relates to some of the discussions we've had and will have on the facility plan. Before going through what's in the packet, just you guys are what's considered a sewerage commission. It's a governmental entity that authorizes you to be created, which is an intermunicipal cooperation governmental agency. There's not a whole lot of regulation associated with a sewerage commission, so almost everything is spelled out in an intermunicipal agreement that in total is about 60 pages long. That was created back in 1997, probably, right? So a couple, in your packet, there's a couple clips that I think will help you guys better understand what your role is in discussions relative to the treatment plant, and then what you are or are not allowed to do. The two biggest things I think for the room to understand is how does borrowing work for your commission? And then what are your authorities relative to the project? So the first, I'm not going to go through each of these.
Don't read it all.
I'm not.
I can read it.
But big picture, technically you are allowed to borrow, but there's some pretty severe limitations associated with borrowing as the commission. It does, and those are in here, that first page, that 4.9, the second page, 6.1.4, and that are really the ones that describe that. But basically, if it's not less than $50,000, can't be paid off in a year. What was the other one? I guess those are the two big things. Or if it's a borrowing event to expand the district. If it's not one of those three triggers, it has to require approval both by this body and each of the municipalities, which is generally consistent with the next page. One thing to be aware of, even if you did take all of those actions, the Clean Water Fund specifically, which is one of the funding packages we talked about the other day, will not borrow to a joint sewerage commission. It is not within their ability to do that. So there's also all sorts of, within each funding agency, specific triggers that will allow or not allow. Conversely, USDA Rural Development would borrow to you guys, but that would trigger this 4.9 where you then have to get 4 out of the 7 of you to vote in favor of a rural development loan, and then parallel to that have each of the 3 communities pass an identical resolution to allow Dane, Iowa to borrow. So the way you originally did your borrowing, which Ray and Bob remember, is each community borrowed individually from the Clean Water Fund. Each community's borrowing quantity was based on their allocation of the treatment plant costs at that time, which was prorated to the communities based on residential living units.
And ability to pay, that came into a factor too.
Yeah, and there was another factor
We got a grant
because you guys got a grant, so that
Because we
made it a
were
messy.
the poor cousins.
Right. So Arena got a bigger grant that paid for, if I remember right, it's the whole force main got paid for by a grant. So that was a standalone thing for Arena. But then that borrowing administration via the intermunicipal agreement, and that's what's in paragraph 6.9, was administered by Dane, Iowa. So what ended up happening was Dane, Iowa collected user fees for borrowing based on RLUs, and then every year would disseminate those dollars to the communities to pay the individual. So each community ended up being the surety for those loans, but just because I'm using fake numbers now, one community borrowed $1 million doesn't mean they paid back that $1 million. If that community grew faster than the other ones, they probably paid more than $1 million. If that community didn't grow as fast as the other two, they didn't pay as much. Does that make sense? Okay.
And then the other caveat is that we're not a taxing entity, therefore we really don't have the ability to pay, but the villages are.
That's
why
an
they
important
have
other
to borrow the
designation that's on the next page is you are not also able to either do general obligation or revenue bond borrowing without express written permission of each of the communities,
Right.
because that is the borrowing authority, like you said, Ray, by which you would do that. So if you were to pursue a plain old borrowing, like a credit card is kind of what's intended by that first paragraph. There's no specific surety against it. If you were to do a general obligation bond, you would have to have express written permission of that community to do that. If you were to do a revenue bond against the sewer utility, it would have to have express written permission from one of those communities for that. The other thing that is summarized in here is what your powers are and what is, and I think this is important for you guys to realize for what you can and cannot make decisions on. So you are ultimately, the 7 individuals in this room are responsible for making decisions directly related to the treatment plant. The treatment plant is defined as everything from the lift stations and force mains to here. So if you 7 individuals feel something needs to happen, that is your purview. You are the manager of those facilities. It is not something that is required to be voted on by the communities.
Your communities have no
The
input.
communities have no input, exactly. And that's kind of outlined in here. The last thing that's outlined in here, and I'm not going to spend much, if any, time on it, is just there's some generic outlines as to how construction costs were paid individually. Those individual payments, essentially, the treatment plant was divided by RLUs amongst all users. And the treatment plant was actually divided into two things. One was the liquid side, the other was the solid side, because Cross Plains pays for a portion of the solid side. Cross Plains had no involvement in the borrowing. So Cross Plains, like each of your three communities, borrowed essentially for Cross Plains, but Cross Plains was the one paying it back. The force mains were prorated equally on RLUs, not equally, prorated on RLUs for Mazo and Black Earth. Arena pays nothing for those force mains. Similarly, Arena, standalone, and I think that was 100% grant at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And then each of the lift stations, similarly, are individually paid for by the communities. That was prorated within the loans. That is not actually defined anywhere within the agreement. However, one of the assumptions that I've made in many of our discussions and any of the figures that you end up seeing is we're following a similar structure to what was established 25 years ago, even if it's not explicitly spelled out word for word in the agreements. I think that was all of the heavy bullet points for this. Any questions related to this or other things that may or may not be included in the agreement?
If one or two of the three communities don't agree to allow borrowing,
It's a mess.
Yeah.
There is some generic language, and I thought I had it at one point, but I can find the exact thing and send it to you guys. But there is a statement in the agreements that basically says if Dane, Iowa intends to pursue some sort of an expansion, modification, whatever, it is a responsibility of the community to pay for that. It doesn't say you have to borrow, but if you do $11 million worth of upgrades, the communities have to pay for it somehow.
And then there's a caveat if you read the whole municipal agreement that if one community decides not to participate, then they get to pay both attorneys and any costs of them disseminating, if they created any costs for the commission or for the sewer plant, then that community stands that cost. So if you pull out or say no, it's a mess.
Yes, it's a mess. So while there are some very strong statements in the agreement, it takes attorneys to enforce strong statements. So it
But
just.
that's what it says. Point blank. You get to pay both lawyers and we win.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Paul, do you have a question?
Can I answer? Thank you.
Yes.
I just had a quick, if the three entities approve for the commission to borrow the money,
Yep.
does that go against that municipality's borrowing
Yes.
capacity in the end? So it doesn't matter if they borrow the money or they give the commission permission?
Correct.
Okay.
The commission, you said it correctly, the commission is not a taxing entity. From a revenue bond standpoint, that may fall into a gray area, but this is pretty clear that you are not allowed to do revenue borrowing on your own.
I can answer that, Paul.
Okay.
Because we just went through it with a safe drinking water loan that we did for a water and street project.
Okay.
If it's a revenue bond, which would come out of the
Yeah,
which
thank you
the
for
clean
bringing
water,
this one.
clean water.
But here it would be clean
right.
water fund, yes.
Right. Then that would be out of, you're pledging the revenue from your sewer utility. That does not count towards your general obligation.
Capacity is not.
That-
a thing.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah.
kind of thought, but I wanted to make sure.
We had
Yeah,
to do it
okay.
because the PSC was dragging their feet on giving us permission to do it through our water, so we had to do it through a GO with the water pledging to pay the general fund, but that counts against our borrowing capacity in Mazo.
Okay.
But otherwise, it should be
The only way it
Sewer
affects
would be-
your
yeah, it should
capacity.
have-
That's kind of what I thought, but I thought I better ask. Thanks for letting me ask a question too.
From a standpoint, because it's important.
But in a bond rating situation, it would show.
Yeah,
up
bond
as a-
ratings are
It
completely
would show up
different.
as an
Yeah.
obligation that your
Yes.
community has, so therefore, yes.
Therefore,
It affects
goes
your
down.
bond rating no matter what. in
But
all of
not
the
your
communities.
capacity.
Right, not your capacity.
Okay.
And it's important to designate too that, what was I gonna say with that? There was an important thing I was gonna say. I can't think of it. I lost it, sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, there's no action needed, this is just mainly for everyone up to speed to understand how bowling works with the commission. Next thing is explanation and discussion of available funds.
Alright, so I'm gonna take this one. This is your nice little table that follows all the excerpts from the agreement. Basically, we just wanted to go through kind of the cash you guys have and explain limitations that are on some of it. So the funds we have are operation and maintenance, replacement fund, connection fee, and FCI, which is your capital improvement fund. The connection fee and FCI are basically liquid. You can spend those how you want. The operation, maintenance, and replacement fund have minimum balance requirements that you need to maintain. The O&M is 25% of your O&M budget for the next year. So the theory behind that is if there's no money coming in, everything is horrible, you can still keep running the plant for 3 weeks. There's an asterisk next to your available O&M money because there are 2 years worth of true-up reimbursements that Dane, Iowa still owes your communities. So 2022 to 2023, that audit is still in limbo. That one hasn't happened, just finished. So this $181,000 number will go down, basically. Your other one is your replacement fund. So that started when you built the plant as part of Clean Water Fund requirements. You have to have a replacement fund.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And how that works is every year you put aside money based on what equipment you have. And the idea is that over the life of each piece of equipment, you're going to have a big pool of money so that when that equipment fails or reaches the end of its life, you have some or most of the money to just replace that piece of equipment. So there's a minimum balance depending on how old all of the equipment is. Because the farther away you get from when it's first installed, the more money you should have. There's a double asterisk next to this one. So this 970,000 minimum balance number is assuming all of the equipment right now from when it was first installed. There is, if we were to do the high priority upgrade list and then update the years to 2024 when the equipment is installed, then your minimum balance is going to go down to 504, which is a big although right now you guys are not technically meeting your minimum balance, but you don't have the Clean Water Fund loan that you're paying back right now. So it's kind of a gray area on that. So all that being said, you have about $650,000, give or take $100,000 to $300,000. $100,000 to $300,000 if you just wanted to spend money on something today. But basically, we just want to give you perspective on where you're sitting, what kind of funds you guys have.
What about the future capital improvement? Wouldn't that come in?
That's liquid.
That's in there.
Yeah.
That's that
That's the
FCI
last
account.
Well, we got 700,000 in that one alone.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so that's on here.
But it's the reason the total goes down is because your replacement fund, you're not technically meeting your minimum balance. So
Yeah.
that's
So right now, it's just a net
Yeah,
picture.
and then it was always my understanding that once we paid off that loan, then this hammer that the DNR had on requirements went away.
It generally does.
Does.
It generally does. It generally does. So that's what Lisa said is there is not an auditing mechanism. You are still required to have a replacement fund, but the regulatory response mechanism is not there. because the Clean Water Fund is the only official regulatory response mechanism. However, if you take out another Clean Water Fund loan, and that's what that double asterisk is meant to represent, is you're still gonna have to maintain similar minimum balance calculations. So that's why she said that this is plus or minus $100,000 to $300,000.
And then by commission decision rules, we cap the capital improvement or the future capital
Correct.
to $1 million.
Correct.
Once we get to $1 million,
Yep.
we're not gonna take any more from the communities.
Yep.
Unless
So
the commission changes
essentially,
the line.
what we're trying to just let you guys know here is, what is your liquid cash situation? Because you need to know as you're making these bigger decisions, what is your liquid cash situation? And this gives you a rough picture of it. Is it perfect? No. There's this line specifically is gray. The first line is gray. Because right now, the 190 column, that's what you generally carry over year to year. That changes every single year, because every single year you have a new budget. Every single year you carry over a new 25% number on that budget, but it doesn't change that much. However, that 181 that's left, unless you guys were to take action differently, that will likely go back as a true up.
Yes.
And because you have 2 years, so essentially that 180 isn't liquid cash for you right now. So there's lots of fuzziness to this, but it gives you a picture. Any questions with that?
Any questions? So now we have a view of what we have liquid cash available to pay for any of these projects. Even though we're not deciding on paying for projects right now, but gives everyone an idea of what's going on. Next one, discussion and possible action on project scope and structure.
So I'll go through this. Essentially, this is meant to be one of your homework assignments. It's just kind of overall broad strokes. I did want to address Paul's comment earlier and clarify what I see the intent of the action on this being. Because I agree with Paul, is you want your communities involved, you want your communities informed. I think the intention of this action is, what is the commission's intention with this? It's not finalizing the facilities plan. It is giving us direction on how we can move forward communicating to the communities. Because we're not going to go back out there and just broadly say, what does everyone want to do? That's your guys' job. You get to decide what you want to do, and then we need to do an education campaign after that. So that would be my intended approach to that, is this action is setting a direction. It's not setting a stone tablet with 10 bullet points on it.
And even if we say these are the projects we want in there for the plan, when we push comes to shove
Every
and it's
step
time
you'll
to
have-
start putting together the package and everything, things are gonna move out, things will move in. And then that'll be when the final decision is down the road, not right now. But this is to get the report done,
So
so we can do stuff with the
Correct.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm now kicking it to you guys, and I don't know what format you want to walk through it on. There's nothing really new. I'm going to take that back in one thing. If you look at the high priority cost breakdown, just to point it out in case it changes from last week, or because it is a different picture than last month by minor amounts. We had mistakenly done the cost split estimate on pounds of sludge instead of RLUs. It's appreciably no difference, but you will see that the numbers are different. That's why. So this page specifically is different than you saw last month by an insignificant amount of dollars. I don't remember what it was, but that was just changing it from pounds of sludge to RLUs, which is how that would actually be billed.
It's just the estimated Dane, Iowa cost and the estimated
Yes,
cost
sorry,
per
thank
cost. Your new cost per month per RLU is the same because of rounding.
And that's only for the 11 million, that's for the high priority items. It's not for the total package, which now adds up to the 20 grand, or the 20 million I told you you'd get to. I figured you'd get the 20 million.
So I guess the questions then come down to the high priority list was discussions between myself and staff, or Lisa and myself and staff. Generally, that's our recommendation for you guys to consider, but you can do whatever you want. We talked a lot last month about risk and cost, and the Yes, Joe.
Well, my only feeling is that I asked Town and Country to supply me with the cost breakdown for just the arena lift station. I wanted something I could look at. And Jeff and I went over there and looked around. Several things on here that are listed as high priority I see as not necessary at all. So I have a problem with the fundamental list. And then some of the costs that I'm really familiar with, like painting, I'm just blown away by the estimates. I mean, blown away. Some of these are, 400 or 500% greater than what it should cost. So if that carries through with it all, then I think we need to take some time and look at it, decide what do we decide is the priority,
As far as the cost go, that would be worked out when you do bids and.
When you do bids, but
Right.
these are estimates that we're basing the RLU increase on this number.
I'm going to disagree with that.
No, we're,
The estimated RLU increase,
Right.
you will not, so if the bid is what you think it will be, which I would argue is different because these are based off
On
real-time
720
bid.
square feet, there's no ceiling in that building. There's floor walls, block walls, they're in perfect shape. There's one that cracks.
That's great, so we'll take it out if you
And
don't want
and
it.
there's no piping.
Right,
You got-
let them finish, please. Let 'em-
So, at the end of the day, you can disagree with it. I've bid a lot of jobs with epoxy block painted walls. And if you don't want it, that's great.
It's not epoxy on
It
that.
absolutely is.
Anyway, even to replace it with epoxy,
It's fine.
you
Then
know,
take it out.
I mean, it's just
I'm all
astronomical.
right.
We're not setting any rates tonight. We're not.
No,
These
but-
aren't,
no, but
these
I
aren't the
mean-
numbers.
But I mean, the perception of the $20-some increase is what I'm finding the most resistance on. And if these numbers are, not correct or vastly inflated, then that would be reflected in what the projection of that rate would be, correct? I mean, how am I wrong? If we spend less than $11 million, it's not gonna be, you guys are gonna pay $25 more a month.
If we spend less than.
No, right now on this,
Right.
with this $11 million,
Right.
your projection, your increase you made was about $25.
$20. Yep.
And anyway, so if we spent a lot less than that, that projection would be lower, correct?
Correct.
And we won't know what it actually is until the bids are let.
Right.
And of course, none of these came in spec, so, like the roof that doesn't, I mean, there's not a thing wrong with that roof, you guys. Not a thing.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do we need to, we talked about this a little bit last month. Do we need to sit down in a separate meeting and go over every
I
topic?
don't think
or
we
not?
need to, but if that's what the commission feels we need to, we can. So that would be, if that's the direction you want to go, especially because this is not the final list, this is what we're starting with the facilities report. Because everything's once the facilities report is done, then it has to be approved by the DNR, which can be 6 months to a year. But when pencil goes, when we look at bidding and we're, ready to do this, that's when the real numbers are gonna mean
Right.
something, and when we get the bids, then we got real numbers. But then we'd be tightening down some of these bids, these numbers before that. We're not deciding that we're gonna raise it up to Mazo another $20 per REU. We're looking at, these are the projects estimated, that's what it's gonna be. And we may not end up doing all those projects when we finally get to that point.
I'm just saying, some of these things can be in the 1 to 5 years, some of them could be in even longer than that. Which is kicking the can financially down the road maybe, but,
Well, what did you see at the lift station that doesn't need to be included?
well, it needs a new roof like I need a head of hair.
Okay,
There's nothing wrong with it. We even looked at the outflow from the eavesdrop to see how much grit was coming out of it. It's so minimal, it's almost like a new roof. There's not even any streaking.
okay, so we can move the
And that's
roof.
just one, and there's more of them out there. And then if I was gonna do it, I wouldn't hang shingles on it, because in another 20 years, some engineer's gonna come up and say, hey, they need to be replaced. You know, hang steel on it. It isn't, the Amish would do it for less than the shingles.
Okay. Well, we're not talking, how we're gonna do each project.
No, but I'm saying that I think the project scope for what's a high priority item,
Right.
what we need to borrow for and spend right now, we need to rely on mechanical things. I don't have an argument with mechanical things at all, none of it. Because that's what makes this plant run. Not what color the walls are.
I see what you're
If
saying
they don't
too,
need
Ray,
paint, they
because
don't need painting. I mean, come on, you guys.
we have touched on the fact
$12,000 to
that
have your bedroom painted, that's how much paint we're talking about. I paint bedrooms bigger than the inside of that plant, of that lift station, for a hell of a lot less than $12,000.
and that's
and I can
something,
do it
Norm,
with the
like you
box.
said, we go through that could be something we could pay, we could write the check.
Yeah,
for
I
when
think
the time
out of pocket
comes.
when it's
And
necessary.
I understand what you're saying, because it was walking around down arena, couldn't
Well,
disagree
you
with
and I
you, Ray.
did, and then the painted
Disagree
pipe
with
that's on here, the
Yeah.
only painted pipe in that building, you and I looked at it, was the fresh air intake for the diesel engine,
Yeah.
where they keep the gas in.
No, and in reality, the paint is in good shape.
One
The
little
roof is
thing
in
about
good
the door,
shape. And
the
and
door needs painting
But
desperately.
I do like the fact that comes to mechanicals, you're all on board.
So, no, we need to update these mechanicals, like I said, the first meeting when we first started talking about it, get that press on order.
Mhm.
Because when that quits, we're out of business.
Right, but we
We're
can't
done
do
here.
that till we get this report.
I understand,
Yeah.
well, yeah, with, yes and no, but anyway, yeah, I get that, yeah.
It's
If it
yes.
breaks, we could buy it tomorrow.
We'd still have to have this, we'd have to get
You
an
would be allowed to
exemption.
do an emergency repair,
With tomorrow, we could buy a new one.
but you're gonna be waiting 12
A
months to get
year.
a new one.
That's why we need to get it on order.
But it's not
But we
broken, so you can't
put
do
it on
this.
order because it's
Until
not
you do
broken
the
until we do
facilities
this.
plan.
Right, that's what we're
I
trying to
understand,
do.
and the United needs to sign off on it, unless it breaks, then we could get one, but there isn't such a thing as having one.
Right, that's why we want to.
Granger doesn't have
We,
one.
we don't want to cut
Correct.
any corners, but we want to keep moving on
Right.
this report. So.
Yeah,
And
that's
why I was
I don't want
asking
to cut
you.
any corners.
That's why I was asking you, you said that there are many things in the lift station that didn't need replacing. I'm asking for ideas, because we could move the roof to the medium.
Well, but I mean, that's just
To
one
be
roof on
clear.
one lift station, maybe the rest are different, but, I seriously doubt it.
To
And
be clear, I have no dog in a roof fight, I have no dog in a paint fight, I have no dog in asphalt. You guys can do what you want. We included them as a generic thing because I told you last month, hold on, Ray, I told you last month, we just lumped everything together in there. The roofs, you may be right, roofs are not engineered. There's nothing fancy about them. They're 25-year-old 3-tab roofs. If you want them funded, they have to be done like this. If you're going to pay for them with cash, you can do whatever you want. That's the other balancing act, is if you want to incorporate it into funding, you're right, an Amish person can fix these roofs like none other, and you're gonna pay way less. But you can't hire an Amish person to do a funded project. They don't meet wage rates. So, that's a decision you guys can make. I have no care whatsoever in whether you paint or don't. I have no care whatsoever in whether you replace a roof or not, or the asphalt, or things that are generic like that. Mechanicals, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ray. That's why we prioritized it. I think the mechanicals at the lift stations should be high priority because it's already been shown during wet weather events, those lift stations become inundated. We already know the arena lift station has another lift station pumping to it that's bigger than it.
yeah,
Doesn't make sense.
no, not at all. How that engineer got away with it, I don't know.
We told them not to.
You told him not to.
So Ray, I mean, I'm fine with taking the roofs out of all of the different projects.
I'm just saying, I'd like to look at the, we need to.
Well, that's what we were supposed to do
the scope.
before this meeting.
I did, but I
Yeah.
only did a microcosm of one thing. I didn't go around to each lift station and make this very same stuff. Didn't have time, number one. And frankly, you see my point though, when I see things that just jump off the page as being way out of whack, then that makes me wonder about the rest. I mean, it's only fair, Logic
Yeah,
says it's
no, I
something.
understand that, right? I'm just saying that that's why we wanted to be able to talk about these so we could get,
Yeah, but I don't think we can, we'll pull the list out, we'll do that tonight and then go on with the rest of it. I'm not ready
Or-
to do that. So.
okay, well, I
But
mean,
maybe
we're not
that's not-
approving the final project here, but we're trying to keep this moving, as you said. What if the bell press goes? As soon as we get it approved, then we can order a bell press if that's still in the final list.
So if we're going in with the list that we have here, we're getting general approval for all of it.
For a project approach. And if you guys want to take random little things out, that's fine. I
Can we
guess
take
I
one
would.
later?
Yeah, we won't, not until we've approved the final project, and that's when we get all the numbers together to borrow and everything.
So why don't we just move forward with it, and then we will have to come
I
back.
think I would encourage not getting lost in the weeds because this is a planning effort. There's zero design. You said the word spec. Not a single individual in the world would ever talk about a specification at this point. It's planning. It's 30 to 40,000 feet. This is the whole process. You start at a plan, then you move into a design. The design works its way from 30,000 to getting close to landing. Bidding is your landing, and then you construct. So if there are macro concerns and you want us to pull something, shift something around, this is the type of thing that we would macro concern. If you want to pull paint out, great, we'll pull paint out and only do it in isolated areas. If you want to go through individual lists, what I would encourage you to do rather than individually do it is let's do a walkthrough of structure by structure what was proposed. And literally the 7 of you, and we can walk through it with you. We go through and micro-analyze each space, but it's meant to be an up here type evaluation
At this point.
at this point.
Yep.
Yes.
How far into it can you decide to pull a few items, right up to the point where you
I guess
bid?
the things I would clarify here are what is a few items. Like if we're talking about paint, you can pull that out the day before bid. I don't care. That is a couple check boxes on the table. If you're talking about we don't want to do the headworks, you can pull it out right before bid. We will have had to have designed it and permitted it at that point, though. Those are more. So you got to differentiate. A roof, asphalt, landscaping, paint.
Something you guys aren't going to put time into
Architectural randomness.
designing. You're not going to
Even
sit and
a
design
door
paint, so
replacement.
you're not
I
going
mean,
to put time into that.
It's easier to have it and remove it than it is to add it later. That's the other layer to this is it's easier to have it and remove it than to add it later. If it's going to be something where it's more unit process related, in the high priority, we've got the lift station. So it's the pumps, the electrical, the generators. Those are the big ticket items there. For the site, it's honestly, most of it is between the water main and the headworks piping reconfiguration. And that headworks piping reconfiguration is mostly due to the strong need to get around the headworks, and we think it creates significant flexibility for you because you're going to pay for it by bypass pumping that anyway. For the headworks, it's just in rough shape. We're going to have paint in there because the whole building is failing. It's going to be an expensive paint. Our cost estimates are built around an epoxy paint coating system for anything that is a concrete wall. And that is based on bid day pricing in a clean water fund style pricing project. I have no vested interest in a paint number being inflated. Painting sucks. It's just expensive. It's the way it goes. You can disagree, but I don't make these numbers up. I just pull them on a bid
somebody's making
form.
them up because they're not realistic.
That might be the case, but it's an open public bid. We have no control over how that gets generated. If you want to start bidding it, Ray, go for it.
No, I can't. I have conflict of interest, but yeah, it would blow your mind.
I believe you. I think it's
And I
ridiculous.
can bring in a
think
dozen
half-
other. I can bring in
I
a
can
dozen other
bring
guys
in
that'll blow your mind
a
too.
whole bunch of other things that will, but the fact of the matter is all of this stuff does get publicly bid. Our cost estimates are based on public bid or data that we collect every year, and this is the reality of it. We spend a lot of time going back through the bids that we receive and backing into the way we cost estimate.
Anyway, that painting's just purely an example. It's like anything you want to pick out of the sky.
Yeah, go for
It
it.
isn't, but I mean, that's just one example that glared out at me. The paving, of course, is another. The roofing's a whole another. And I haven't even begun to look at these other places. So, and I know it's not significant. We're not going to drop it by millions,
Right.
by doing that. But you know, another hat that I wear is that I run the local food pantry in Arena, and we're up by 30% right now. Families in Arena are struggling to pay their bills.
I wholeheartedly.
So when you start increasing this, knowing that there will be add-ons, upcharges from the village,
The goal is,
And-
I
and
understand what you're saying.
that's going to increase it to the point that it's going to have an effect on the residents that I'm supposed to represent.
I agree with you.
So,
But
I have to be vocal for
and
that.
I agree with the process that you're going through. I'm defending myself in. I have no vested interest in causing those numbers to be inflated. I'm trying to do the best we can with the information we have today, and this is a 30,000 foot evaluation. If you choose not to do some of these things, that's why we had the discussion we did last month. It's a risk reward thing. If you say, I don't want to do the oxidation ditch, that's okay. That's your decision. It's not going to fail tomorrow. It's not even going to be under capacity to cause you to violate your limits. What could happen though is it fails and it takes 6 months to get it, and you can't run a summer with the same thing happen that we had to fix on this side. The belt press we've beaten to death, the headworks, those are the types of things. The well, if that well fails, it's as bad as the belt press failing, because then you can't run the belt press.
therein lies another question I have. But anyway, the well failing is, it happens.
How many municipal quality wells that are submersible do you see lasting 25 years? I will argue almost none.
We had that pump pulled, what,
You did not.
2 years
Didn't
ago?
have it replaced, but it was, we had a piece of pipe
Yeah.
had to be
You-
replaced.
You,
That was in the early
you
years.
repaired the
I think
column
Richard was
pipe.
still here.
No,
TCW
it wasn't that long
did.
ago.
No, we haven't had, we were talking
You
about
had
it.
an issue with a pressure switch here, is what you're thinking
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, it
But
didn't
we
get
didn't have,
pulled.
It did not
Brian was
pull.
talking
Yeah,
about
we
it for
had
a
this
while, but we
conversation.
didn't.
We didn't have it done.
Because that's when we were talking about, should we be looking at a second water source, a second well, or connecting up to village water at that point? Because
Yeah.
the concern was the well failing and us not having any water at the plant. So, but it hasn't been pulled. So
How many gallons per minute is the pump?
I don't remember. It's 50,
60
100.
maybe.
Yeah, something like that. 50 to 100, somewhere in that.
Yeah, I think it operates at about 60 or did because when we had it.
It's got to be more than 60 because the belt press takes
was gonna say
60
it's
to
gotta be
100 by
more.
itself. I think it's 120 actually. Now that I say
Why
that.
we bidded that probably.
We could pay for that out of, if it did fail, we
You
could pay for
could,
it out of.
The challenge is you have about a 4-day window before it starts causing you problems.
You're right. So,
And the other concern we have that we see a lot, and you see it here too, and it's in your plumbing, is what does that screen look like? What is that? That's a shallow well. They do foul. You've had corrosion in here. Those same things happen to your well casing. And we see that happen quite frequently where you got to replace those well casings, and that is not a 1 week endeavor. Even cleaning it, rehabbing it, chemical rehabilitation of a well is,
it would be nice to have be on village water.
Sure would
Yeah.
be.
But that's big bucks. Get that over here.
Because that's why you were there, right?
We could drill wells. We could drill half a dozen wells cheaper.
Yeah.
well, that was one of the
Can't
things
do.
we had talked about before, is having a second well, so they had
Mhm.
2 wells to work on.
and based on costing out a second well here, and rehabbing this, or connecting Maine to Mazo, it's about a horse apiece over a 20-year basis.
It's about the same.
About the same cost. And we can go into
It was
details.
$1 million a mile when I asked to run the discharge down to include Mountain Creek.
I don't know where that figure came from, Ray, but I can tell you it's about $300,000 to connect to Mazo. And by the time you drill a well and rehab the existing well and do all of the bladder tank work that needs to happen, because it's not just the wells, you have a mini pressure water system here. It's about a horse apiece.
Anybody else on the commission have something to say?
Is that included in this
Yes.
estimate? Where is it?
Yep. It's on site work.
Plumbing, okay, yeah, I see, yeah. I guess I personally respect Ben and staff for what they're proposing as high priority. And I think, just include everything, then, as you said, Ben, you can always take it out, but you can't add it back in as easily.
And I can see some of the Ray's point about some of the lesser items, books, painting, stuff like this, that we could go with and then either patch or paint as we need to and pay cash for, and not fund. I can see that point too, but most of this stuff here, I took the tour with Sean and Mitchell, and even Mitchell knows some of the bad stuff because he was pointing stuff out to me right away that was on this list, and he hadn't seen the list yet. So, our staff's aware of what needs to get done, and they were bringing it up a lot. Now, again, like I said, some of the stuff like roofs, we didn't look at the roofs, and and if talking to Jeff, none of them are leaking or anything like that, so we could let that slide. Not a
I
big
did
ticket,
find
but-
one in the yard the other day. I almost
Oh,
was
shingle?
like, you gotta be kidding me. First time I've ever found
I was gonna ask.
a tap.
That was just Mitchell going up there and throwing rocks, just to piss you off.
Well, I feel bad blaming Sean now.
Sean couldn't climb up to the roof.
Yeah, but it was like that in 25 years, that's the first one I found down here, so.
But at the same time, we have time to peel those off later after we get the report done, and maybe, at that point, we find spots that we want to do, and it may not be as expensive, or we might have something else that is not as expensive as we thought, but.
Well, we're not proposing putting shingles on tomorrow anyway, but by the schedule that was provided last month, we're a year and a half from even getting things.
That's,
Yeah.
everything is perfect.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
and
just
that's-
things go real
Right,
fast.
right, we're probably even farther out, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're talking a different roof in 2 years from now.
Right,
I mean,
right.
that's where I think the concern is, if the longer we delay, the longer it's gonna take to get where we wanna be.
Especially for critical elements of this. That's why
Yeah.
I don't want to cut corners, but I want to keep it rolling, and the things
Yeah.
that can be changed later on, then I don't want to spend a ton of time
Right.
discussing.
Right,
Bob, make your motion.
I guess, could I make a motion?
Yeah.
I guess I would like make a motion that we accept the high priority items as presented, and at some point in the future, if something isn't needed, then we can just remove it. But at this point, I feel we have to do everything that's on this list, because I respect Ben and staff to know what the plant needs.
And you're accepting them to be put into the report. We're not
Correct,
bidding or anything, because we're just
Yes.
putting them in the report.
correct.
And you specified, in your motion, you specified high priority, and are we,
Yeah.
we're talking about this plan in totality, right?
Yeah, I would recommend, if you guys are willing to consider it, that you, if that's what you're planning on doing, is just the project approach as presented, because that then does as presented high, medium, low priority.
And I guess that's what I'd like in my motion.
So you amend that to the
Yes.
project approach.
Correct.
So it went, Ben described it.
I'll second that. It should be written with some precision, though.
What?
Motion.
The motion, I'm just gonna read it back to you before we vote on it, just to make sure. Any further comments, or should I read back the motion?
Yeah, read it back, please.
So what I have here, the accept project approach, accept project report to be included into the facility report.
Is that the right title, Ben? Facilities?
Facility plan.
Facilities plan, sorry, thank you. So, does that sound like the motion? Second, Bob, did you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, now any further discussion on that? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Ray votes opposed. Thank you very much, everyone. Next step, discussion of project funding options. And this is, again, this is not an action thing, but we're going over what the funding options are. Ben went over this last time, or Lisa, or maybe both of them, went over it last time, and so we're just gonna kind of go over this so everyone's aware of what the opportunities we have for funding if we end up keeping going further.
Yeah, so this is the same exact sheet as last time. Just wanted to put it in front of you. It's the Dane, Iowa Wastewater Treatment Plant Community Funding Options table. Again, it's just the primary funding sources we typically look at for wastewater treatment plants. I have whether or not BABA applies, which, as a reminder, that's the Build America, Buy America law that causes prices to inflate. If any community has something with BABA funding, then the entire project would qualify, even if the other communities didn't have it. Clean Water Fund currently does not. None of you qualify for BABA under that because your populations aren't large enough. And under Clean Water Fund, all of you would qualify for some amount of principal forgiveness. Yes. But just a summary, wanted to get in front of you if you have any more questions, if you want to, I can talk about it more if you want, but just wanted people thinking about it.
And this would be the municipalities deciding on.
Yes, each municipality could decide what funding option they wanted to pursue.
And it's important to note you can do different funding approaches. But as Lisa said, if one of you does a funding approach that triggers BIL requirements or BABA requirements, then the whole project triggers that, unless you somehow isolate projects, which for the treatment plant is impossible. Because you can't isolate it to a given community. If one of your communities was pursuing something with BABA and you did a standalone project at a lift station, that you could probably work out to be called a completely separate project. Because the lift stations are paid for individually by the communities.
And as you pointed out last month, BABA doesn't apply if you can't get the electronics made in America. And you can't get the electronics made in America.
If you, correct.
So
Yep.
BABA's not even,
Correct.
you
Yeah.
can
Unless
take that
something
off the
changes
sheet.
this fall or changes because people realize that they can't fund water and wastewater projects with BABA money. Yeah, you are correct, Ray.
It's not gonna happen.
And we're a ways away from
Correct.
talking,
Yeah, so
the community's talking about it, so changes might happen.
correct.
So the BABA applies to USDA and Clean Water Fund as well?
No, Clean Water Fund does not.
Does not, okay.
Correct. So the other thing I would like to point out with USDA, so USDA, we have that up to 45% for Marina and Black Earth. One thing to be aware of today for USDA is that program funding level is way down, way down. So the likelihood that, even though you qualify in that category, the likelihood that you get a 45% grant in 2024 or 2025 is very, very low. honestly, it's really too bad because that program has helped a ton of communities. And I don't know what Washington's trying to do, but they're not doing good things to it. And it has made it, between BABA and the low funding levels, it's made it almost a not valuable program.
So they're basically looking at clean water fund?
Clean Water Fund, I think, is probably the
That's
most
probably the
popular.
only one that will.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the one I,
Unless you can pull some strings, Norm, at the DNR. Huh? Tell them to pull out the checkbook.
yeah, I would agree the Clean Water Fund is probably the way to go.
Yeah. Now, as a reminder for everyone, that means each community is applying individually. So the project budget would be established by Dane, Iowa. The borrowing amount would be based upon the RLUs at the whatever year the loan closing happens. And then my assumption would be you'd administer it in the same fashion you did the first Clean Water Fund loan, which would mean everyone pays Dane, Iowa. Dane, Iowa gives the annual payment to the communities.
So can you back up on that just a little bit? So the villages all pay Dane, Iowa,
Correct.
and then Dane, Iowa,
was then giving each of the villages their payment for their individual Clean Water
Okay.
Fund loan, is my understanding of
Okay.
how that worked. I did never actually look under the book, so I don't know if anyone else can corroborate my story, but that's how I understood it happened.
That's how
Dane, I would be
understood it.
collecting monthly and then
Yep.
Yeah,
a 1-year
Correct.
payment then.
yeah.
okay,
Yeah, Clean Water Fund and Rural Development do 2 payments annually. One is principal and interest, the other one is just interest. And so Dane,
And they won't let you make an extra.
and they will not make you make, but
Correct.
they will not make you prepay it.
No, I was all into paying it off early, that we couldn't
I've
have.
tried that a handful. They will sometimes let you. It's way less
But
frequent.
the extraordinary circumstances, you have to be in financial crisis to pay it off early, and if you're in financial crisis, you can't pay it off.
so are we gonna make a motion on that item?
No, because
It's
we
just
are
another-
telling the.
Right,
Yeah, it's-
okay, got
And,
it.
and it
It's
was
just so
really,
everyone's aware of it, to
Yeah,
put the
yeah.
pieces together and
yeah,
have.
there's nothing new to discuss. It was more, we went through a lot of stuff last month. If you guys had questions that popped up in the meantime, we could talk through those.
And obviously, during the community-wide discussions, these funding options will be explained to
Yep.
residents.
And eventually, if that's the direction that it go, or we keep moving forward in the directions, we'll have to begin individual actions by the communities.
Bottom line is, the community's gonna have to go to some bank or another though, because these are only guaranteed, they're not actually, the funds aren't disseminated, so it's some local bank that's gonna be.
No, you don't need a local bank. Clean Water Fund does construction
Oh, it
financing. You might be thinking a USDA
Yeah.
requires you to do the local bank. They do it differently than Clean Water Fund does. So you wouldn't not need any interim financing or local bank to do a construction loan or anything like that. It would all be through Clean Water Fund. But that process is much more regimented in terms of time. So in order to do a Clean Water Fund loan, you've got to submit an intent to apply in October, by October 31st. You would, if you do them back to back, it's October. Then the following September, the plans and specs need to be submitted to DNR and a loan application. So in the case of Dane, Iowa, 3 loan applications get submitted to DNR in September. And then you would bid your project somewhere between December and February. And then loan funds and loan closing would occur somewhere 2 to 4 months after your bids are received, because then you have to submit those bids to DNR, you finalize your project budget at that point, and then loan closing can be scheduled and occur, and then there'd be 3 loan closings between all of the communities.
Okay, ready to move on then? Next one's number 12, discussion of possible action on organizing village informational meetings. We're required to have one public hearing.
Yep.
But in conversations we had last time, we wanted to do individual ones with each community. So the option is how we would like to do that. We had discussed the last meeting that, I'm not trying to sway a vote, but we had talked about possibly having them at a regular village board meeting so that we'd have village board members, the ones that have to make decisions. But it also opens up people in the community to also be there. So we'd have one public hearing for as a group is what we're looking at, and then basically 3 village board meetings that they'd be attending.
The first one, as a group, be one huge meeting, like at,
Or.
Or we
individual.
could do a public hearing at each one of the board meetings.
Yeah, I guess, so you are regulatorily required to do a public hearing. The public hearing is something that has to happen after the facilities plan has been finalized, the whole report document has been finalized and approved by you guys. So that's a moderately specific thing. So what we typically do for those public hearings, because there's not a specifically prescribed arrangement, is we'll do a class 2 notice. So that means 2 newspaper postings. For that, we would do it in all 3 of your communities. 2 weeks leading up to the actual meeting, public hearing. On or around the time that the notice happens, we would make the facilities plan report, both in paper form here, probably in each of your village halls as well as in a digital form available to the public. We have the public hearing, and then we would keep a commentary period open until 30 days has passed since we made the report available. So people can still submit comments after the fact. Then we would bring it back to this body for a final blessing before it's approved. And you guys can then react to the public comments if there was something you wanted to revisit. That can, and I would say probably should be, separate from the education effort for your different community boards and different communities. And that's kind of what you guys' homework was, is how you decide what you want to do there. I would say, in my opinion, a level of meetings where we present the same style of discussion that we have today, not having a final report, but having a lot of figures and information available, brings people up to speed in advance of a public hearing. And then we'll finish up the report while we're doing that, because it's going to take us some time, starting today, to finish that report based on the action you just took.
so individual.
That's for you guys to decide.
Right.
Before the actual, in the public hearing is everyone, is what, right?
And that's after the report's been finalized,
Yeah, right.
but the informational meetings can be before.
Right.
Because there's no statutory requirement for that.
So individual meetings with each village
We
board.
can absolutely do it that way.
Yeah, and anyway, that's between the village boards and Ben here. You're gonna have to coordinate
Well,
with
it's
your
really,
It's us how we
you
want
guys tell me how you want to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you think individual meetings is the way to go,
What's your experience? So if this first meetings, one meeting like at the school and everyone's invited, or 3 individual meetings?
that's a possibility. There's pros and cons each way. The pro of everyone being in the same room is they hear exactly the same thing. They hear the questions that the other communities ask. However, it can very quickly turn into a shit show.
In a facility, and then getting people to attend, they're more likely to do it in their own
Possibly.
communities rather than, as
or-
you said, the school. That's not our school. Our school is that way.
Yeah.
If, there's the school, if you guys were to do a group meeting, honestly, I would propose you do it in the garage here. We clean it out, we set it up, you could make a tour available, whatever, use it as, really dude it up as an education event. Or you do like Peter and Ray said is, I have the same PowerPoint at all 3 individual communities, but I give the same information. There is possibilities that each community hears something slightly different because the questions that get asked, I can guarantee you, I'm not going to
Just
say the
get you
exact
better
same
for your
words.
next meeting, Ben.
But, that's another option. The benefits there are, it's a little bit more manageable from a running a meeting standpoint.
Right, there's structure to it because
I
it's a village
see-
board meeting, so
I,
they've got some
I see
structure.
pros and cons both ways. I've done it both ways. I don't think we've ever had, in my time with you guys, a group municipalities meeting. I don't know if there
Never.
ever has been
Never.
previous to that. So,
Well, I can't say never, but not in
yeah,
my
but
time.
not in, yeah.
I kind of like the idea of the 3 meetings beforehand, the informational ones. It gives each board a chance to talk about it. It gives people the opportunity to go to one in their communities, like Ray said, and ask questions.
Yep.
And then for the public hearing that we're gonna have after the formalized plan, because that one, we're gonna want all the commissioners to be at, because it'll be basically a commission meeting, hold a public hearing. And that way we would hear all the comments at the public hearing all together. We wouldn't hear anything.
Do we have to reach out to Cross Lanes? They're customers all.
That's a good question. I hadn't
And
thought
then
about
what
that.
about Heights? They're
I've
actually,
kind of been lumping Heights in with Mazo and Black Earth.
okay, but they're an entity of their own.
They are.
But the debt's not with.
Yeah, they don't bear the
they
debt.
won't.
They
Right.
pay.
The
they
school
pay
district won't incur any debt.
And the
Just
Cross
so-
Plains won't either.
Right.
Right. But do we have to inform them because there will be?
Well,
That's
we
a
have
good
to
question.
inform them,
Yeah.
but whether they need.
Yeah, we absolutely have to inform them, but
But check in to see if it's statutory that we.
there's no
They're
statute.
just
I think we could
Yeah.
just talk to them and see. if
Because
if
they would be
want-
invited to the public hearing. I mean, they're
Right.
everybody's welcome to
And
come.
they could arrange that.
Because
to come.
statutorily, we don't have to do what we're talking about right now. It's a good idea, but since Cross Plains is not having any voting share of it,
Right.
it's a direct contract customer. And I've always, yes, you're right. Wisconsin Heights gets billed individually, but I view them as they're a taxed entity of the Black Earth and Mazo group.
Right.
You know, they're part of the Black Earth, Mazo, Force Main, all of that. So I always just lump them in as a
Okay,
customer alongside of them.
Yeah.
If I would
Keep
agree.
them
Cross
informed, and if
Plains,
they feel
yeah.
they need a meeting,
And
then we could work something out, but otherwise, we have the public
They
hearing.
know what's going on.
But we
So.
could, as long as we're informing them of what's going on.
All right.
I had 2 other thoughts relative to the group meeting. So it sounds like everyone is leaning towards individual meetings.
Yeah.
I think it would be good, and it can either be your individual community representatives, or if you wanted to have a designated representative from the Dane, Iowa Commission, I think that would potentially be a good thing to have at that meeting. So like when I go to Arena, either having the same designated person of U7 coming to that meeting, or one of you 2 go to that meeting as a specific thing.
It should be
as
at
a-
the meeting.
Right, and I guess that'll cover it, but, so it's not completely a Ben
Yeah.
item and telephone game.
There's only a couple of us here that aren't elected. so-
Right. So that's something to think about if you wanted to have a single representative from the commission, in addition to me and Lisa going to these, just to act as another representative of the situation.
I picked Mitchell.
Congratulations.
I'll second that.
To the wall.
From black guy to presenting at the full board.
All right.
So, we are taking action on this if you
Yeah.
so fit. Anybody have a motion?
A motion to
We'd
agree.
like to do the meetings. I mean, we've kind of discussed, I think we've all kind of agreed on one way to do the meetings, but we still need a motion and
I'll make a motion to
Individual community.
individual community meetings.
for the
I'll second.
informational, and then
You're gonna
the
have-
hearing would do together.
Yes,
Yep,
yes.
yep, I'll second that.
Okay. So the motion is 3 individual meetings in each community, or 1 in each community. And then for the public hearing, the
Whatever.
statutory one, we will have 1 big meeting and we'll tentatively have it here, but I think we'll fix that up because we have set dates and everything too.
Yeah, and I know I had one board member that requested like a weekend day, possibly.
I think that would be up to you guys if you want to do it. I think,
I mean, for the group meeting,
of the group meeting,
yeah.
I think we're going to get much better attendance if we have it in the evening.
Yes.
I've been to weekend meetings and it's pretty sparsely
Well,
populated.
this person is thinking of like children who are in sports and parents having to attend sports events, inability to meet, but, you know.
Well, and then when I
Whatever.
was involved with sports with my kids, the weekends were busier than the weeknights, but we can figure that out. I
Yeah.
mean, we've got
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And if you guys really have a strong for your meeting, you can set it whenever you want, or you can set it at your board meeting.
Yeah, I think
But, yeah.
our board meeting would be an excellent,
I like the idea to get all the board members that they can ask questions
yeah.
easily. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right, next one, discussion on possible action on the timeline, project timeline.
So this is kind of the last big picture thing that we need direction from you guys on. This is another one of those things that's written in pencil, not pen, but we put an anticipated project timeline in the facilities plan, kind of as the last thing. Last month, we looked at this figure, and that, I wish I would have changed the label on it, because I even forgot what I said about it, but that was intended to be, here's how the fastest you could go in. It's not necessarily the recommended approach, it's just the fastest you could go. I did update it this month just because it was presented as the fastest you could go if you make a decision last month. So now it's fastest you can go now having made a decision this month. Where we'd shoot to have a facilities plan draft at your meeting in October, November public hearing, and then by May, we kind of got to be all swimming the same direction. By September, you submit plans and specs to DNR, and January, February of 26, you bid to do construction. I guess the feedback and the decisions that I would ask you to make is not necessarily any individual discrete timelines. Those are pretty well preset relative to funding. You know, you don't get to choose whether or not September is a date. It's a date because the funding agency says it's a date. But you can say, are we shooting for September of 2025, September of 2026, or pick a year? And it just shifts everything on this, change the year. Same picture otherwise. My general recommendation for you is, while this is possible, I would not recommend you do it that fast. I think you're going to get significant pushback from your communities. I think everyone does need time to absorb this. I think everyone needs time to, do their own individual rate analyses, because that is something they will need to do in order to secure that funding. And honestly, it's not going to do due diligence for you relative to designing some of the improvements that are going to happen, because my goal for you would not be that you buy a 1998 Chevy, that we buy at least a 2024 Chevy, which means things like the headworks, we wouldn't put that same screen back in the headworks today that you have, which needs time for Jeff to be able to see screens and say, what do I like, what don't I like? For us to be able to walk through cost-benefit type discussions with that. Belt press is the other perfect example. Very few belt presses are being installed in 2024. There's a lot more and more technologies out there that are reliable. There's a lot different technologies that are out there that are reliable, and there's pros and cons with every single one of them. So what I would recommend you do is, at the earliest, shoot for DNR submittal September of 2026. So that gives you calendar year 2025 to kind of get the community houses in order. You can spend some time, we can spend some time preliminarily designing, sizing things, doing site visits with Jeff and staff. If you guys want to come on site visits, you can. And we can go through a selection process for specific equipment types. But that's up to you. You can still absolutely do it faster. You can do it slower.
And you,
Right, big side there, what were you gonna say?
I think this is, I think he's making a valid point, There's a lot of stuff to be done, and to push it through really fast isn't going to,
and you're suggesting
excuse me.
September?
Yeah. Okay, Kate,
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, yeah.
No, I'll just step.
No, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I
And
apologize.
The other hidden benefit is by 26, my commission will be up.
Oh, congratulations, Nate.
You can take a deep sigh.
Thanks, Ray.
Okay,
Now we have a discussion.
okay, so you're proposing what month and year?
So basically, that September date is kind of that threshold date. So I'm saying September 2026 would be
Okay,
a
for the
reasonable
plans.
approach to keep things moving, but not make it so you have to make rapid decisions that may not be the best thing for the commission.
Hey, if you want a motion, that's my motion.
Second.
Okay. So we use the September 26th date and build the calendar around it.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're shifting this whole 2
Yep.
years.
1 year.
1 year
One year.
from what the
Yeah.
fastest we could do it in,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
really wasn't the best way, but it was just the fastest.
So that puts us out late 27, early 28 before we get a shovel on the ground?
No, that puts you to putting a shovel in the ground in early 27.
Early
Early
27.
27.
Gotcha.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have a timeline. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, everybody. Now we get to the regular stuff. Review and approval of the O&M bills for July of 2024.
Move as approved, move as presented, excuse me.
Thank you both.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Lisa.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
Can I get a second, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Kate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Review and approval of the replacement bills for July 2024.
Same motion.
I'll second.
Kate? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number 16, review and approval of the July 2024 financial statement.
Same motion, Pete.
I'm looking for you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kate.
With the addition of the fact that, you know, you guys need to keep in mind that when it says future improvement checking, that we have more money than that.
Yeah, the three
Because
CDs.
we have the 3 CDs to help you out.
Yeah.
Okay,
You bet.
just so you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. July 2024 Dane, Iowa Wastewater Facility Report. You're up, Jeff.
As you can see by the sheets, plant's running good. Flows are kind of back down. Kate made comment that their bill was quite a bit higher, and that's to be understood. You can see just in the flows themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, you were talking 2.8 million.
right, now it's
and
double.
You're 4.8, 2 more
Yeah.
million gallons.
That's a lot
Right.
of people
Yeah.
are pumping into the system right now because of the.
Yeah,
They're
but
basic
you're
stuff.
down to 122,000 yesterday, and you're
Yeah,
normally
it's
50 to 75.
It's out of my pit now.
Yeah.
My pit's dry. But there's still people pumping.
I'm happy for your pit.
If you lived in Arena, you'd have a pit in your basement.
Oh, I know. No, I get it. I get it.
The
Just messing with you.
dehumidifier is in and running as of today. Mitchell and I got it downstairs, and it's running. It's already pushing a lot of water out, so that appreciate the go ahead on that. Just everything's running nice. We're fixing some things, and
And the press, you mentioned you were having.
we
a lot
put the
of
new
issues.
compressor on the compressor motor on the air compressor. 3 different times actually, because the first 2 were no good.
You're getting good at it.
First one, yeah, 3rd time we didn't, damn near cut the time in half, right? But, so that's made a nice difference, and we still have to put the new tank on and plumb that air dryer in. But that's gonna be we need a 2 or 3 day window where we can take the time and know we won't have to run the press. So, but it's made a nice difference in the running of the air system, that's for sure. It took all the worry out of whether or not it was gonna stay running. Other than that, really don't have anything to add to that, so. It's been nice seeing people come in for tours. Been nice.
very valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's it.
Any questions? Hearing none, we will move to informational items. Anybody have anything informational wise? I want to thank you two gentlemen for coming. We always like having an audience.
Thanks, Mitchell, for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Thanks
Bob's
for putting the
motion.
butt of the jokes.
I vote for
Thanks, Bob. Second. And Ray, there we go. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.